What's good, YouTube? My name is Ms. V. Welcome back to another video with me. I'm your favorite math teacher out here. And if I'm not, then I will be soon. As always, I record videos on geometry right now. Like I said, I'm going to get into the other maths, but you got to start somewhere, right? So today what we're going to be talking about is what happens when we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal and all the different angles that are formed when we have parallel lines being cut by a transversal, okay? So let's go ahead and just hop right into it. And as always, you guys know that I write on my iPad while I record these videos, which is why I'm usually looking down. So don't mind me. But anyway, parallel lines, if you don't remember what those are, I talked about it in a previous video. So you can go ahead and watch that video on geometric terms to see that. But parallel lines are just two lines that never touch. And this little guy in pink right here is called a transversal. And a transversal is pretty much just a line that cuts through parallel lines. So that is the literal definition of a transversal, a line that cuts through parallel lines. And you can have more than just two. I only have two on my screen right now because I'm just talking to you guys about the basic angles, but we can have 3, 4, 5, infinitely many parallel lines. And if you have a line cutting through all of them, that line is still called a transversal, okay? So let's go ahead and jump right into the different angles that are formed when we have parallel lines cut by a transversal. And the first one that I want to talk about is the one that I'm drawing in green on my screen, which are called alternate exterior angles, okay? And when I go over these terms and these angles with my students, I like to talk to them about what the actual word in English means. So the word alternate means that you're switching sides, or you're kind of switching between two things. You're alternating between, like if you're alternating between tasks, you're doing one task and then another task, and you're going back to the previous one. You're kind of going back and forth, okay? So it's the same idea with alternate exterior angles. Alternate, what that means is that you're on two opposite or different sides of that transversal. So for example, this angle over here is on the right side of the transversal, and then this one down here is on the left side of the transversal. So they're on alternate sides of that pink line. And then they're called exterior angles because they're outside of the white lines. Okay, so they're exterior or outside of your parallel lines. So alternate, different sides of the transversal, exterior, outside of the parallel lines. Okay. And alternate exterior angles are congruent, which means they will always have the same measure, okay? So if this alternate exterior angle is 70 degrees, then the other alternate exterior angle will also be 70 degrees, okay? Then we have something called alternate interior angles, which follow the same rule as the alternate exterior angles. The only difference is that alternate interior angles are now going to be inside of your parallel line. So exterior, they were outside, interior, now they're inside, but they're still going to be on opposite sides of your transversal, okay? And they're also going to be congruent, okay? They're also going to be congruent. And in this case, notice here, these two angles are directly across from each other, so they're also called vertical angles, which I talked about in my previous video on more geometric terms. So these two angles in orange and in green are also vertical angles because they're right across from each other. So if that alternate exterior angle is 70 degrees, that means that this interior angle, alternate interior angle, is also going to be 70 degrees, which means that his buddy over here is also going to be 70 degrees, okay? So usually my kids get really confused when we start doing this because they don't see how so many of these angles have the same exact measure. But as long as you can kind of have it clear in your head, like, oh, okay, this is alternate exterior, these two are congruent. Okay, now let me see, these are vertical. Oh, okay, these two are congruent. So I always tell them to identify the angles that are congruent first when you have an example. And in another video, I'll go over some examples of these and like how to solve for the angles, that kind of stuff. But today I'm just introducing them to you guys, okay? We also have something called corresponding angles, okay? Corresponding angles. And the easiest way that I can think of corresponding angles is that I think of the position of the angle itself. So like, for example, if I look at this angle right over here, and I'm going to mark it in purple, Okay. If I look at that angle in purple, it's kind of like this up there, right? If I literally just slide that angle down, so it's up here, right? This is the parallel line, this is the transversal. So it's up here. If I just slide it down to this position right over here, those are called corresponding angles. So basically they're angles that are in the same place. All you have to do is translate them or slide them down in order to get them to be in its corresponding spot. Okay. And you only go up and down. Don't go side to side. Because that's not corresponding angles, because that angle, unless you have multiple transversals. So if you have another transversal in here, then we can look at that, and I'll go over that in another video, because these can get a little bit complicated, but just don't let them complicate you. So corresponding angles are basically angles that are in the same exact position. They're just translated down, okay? Either from up, down, or down, up, one or the other, okay? And they're also considered congruent, okay? So these are also congruent. So those are our 3 congruent angles. We also have vertical angles, and I talked about them in the previous video, but I'll write it down over here as well. So vertical angles. These are also congruent, okay? So these are the 4 kinds of angles that are congruent. Then we have angles that are supplementary. So I'm going to go ahead and redraw my parallel lines. And I'm going to cut them by a transversal. Cut them with the transversal over here. Okay. And we also have same side exterior angles. Okay. So same side exterior. Now we're not looking at alternate. So now they're not on different sides of the transversal. They're both on the same side. Like for example, here, they're both on the right side of that transversal. Okay. So they're on the same side of the transversal, but they're still outside of those parallel lines. So they're going to be called same side exterior angles. And these angles are supplementary. Okay. So that means that when I add them up, they're going to equal 180. So supplementary, when I add them together, they're going to equal 180. And as always, since we have same side exterior angles, we're also going to have same side interior angles. Okay. Same side interior angles, which will also be supplementary. And what I suggest is while watching this video, try to color code things like I'm doing as well. That's usually what I have my students do with colored pencils, is I'll have them on a diagram. I'll print out some parallel lines cut by a transversal, and I'll have them color in like, okay, these are the exterior angles, and they're also alternate exterior angles. These are the alternate interior angles, that kind of stuff, because it makes it easier to visualize it when you have just the colors to associate with what they are, okay? And then finally, we have linear pairs, which we talked about as 2 angles that are right next to each other. And when you add them together, they're going to be 180. Okay. So these are all the different angles that we have when we have parallel lines cut by a transversal. So if you guys like this video, go ahead and subscribe to my channel down below, right there. And then click on that notification bell so that you guys can get notifications when I post new videos. I try to post about 3 videos a week, but you know, we'll see. Once basketball season starts, that might be changing. But anywho, thank you guys so much. So much love for all of you guys. And thank you for supporting my channel. I will see y'all in my next video. Bye, y'all.